Hey, have you ever wondered why so many metal bands love Friedrich Nietzsche? Well, me too. So I asked Andy from Thus Spoke Zarathustra why his band is named after one of Nietzsche's greatest books. Why do they love Nietzsche so much?
And Nietzsche's take, in my opinion, on nihilism is like everything might be empty of inherent quality, but this is how you can make it matter to you. And I feel like he's a very design your own life type of guy.
Plus, we talked about MySpace Deathcore. And I want y'all to do something. During the interview, count how many influences he cites that aren't musical. I'm talking technology, fashion, biographies. That's why the music's so interesting. Plus, there are some insane song titles on their upcoming record, I'm Done with Self-Care, It's Time for Others' Harm, coming out this Friday, May 23rd. Without further ado, here is Andy from Thus Spoke Zarathustra on episode 219 of Heavy Metal Philosophy. Andy from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
Thank you so much for having me. Very stoked to be here.
I'm stoked to have you. As soon as I saw your band, I was like, okay. They named themselves after Nietzsche's seminal work. What was the inspiration there? What made you want to name your band after that book?
So initially, I wanted to have a band name that was like something really long, like all the old MySpace bands, like Arsonist gets all the Arsonist gets all the girls. I wrestled a bear once. I set my friends on fire, and it just so happened to be a book that was the first book I saw on my shelf, and I was like, I really like this book, and you know what? I feel like it fits, and but I love the book as a whole, so I thought it was cool initially. But initially, you know, it was just like, let's see what happens with this. But
well, the new album definitely has a Zarathustra sort of vibe to it. I'm done with self-care. It's time for others' harm. It reminds me of Zarathustra would go down and he would talk to his disciples, and then he would find them lacking, and then he would retreat back up to the cave. It's kind of a similar thing here. It's like, okay, I tried this whole self-care thing. We're going a different direction.
Yep.
Not only is the album, I mean, the band name long, but a lot of these song titles are long too. I love long, heavy metal song titles. One of my favorites is I Tampered with Evidence at the Murder Scene of Odin.
Oh, that's dope.
So we've got one here. I never believed in magic till my dog turned into a snake.
Yeah, that's like I was sitting at the coffee shop with one of the guys, Hunter, and I don't know how it came up. Because the name is from like a meme, and like when he was like, he just said, he was like, I guess we were talking about people stabbing you in the back or something. I don't know what it was, but he was like, yeah, man, never believed in magic till my dog turned to a snake. You know what I mean? And I was like, that'd be a funny song name.
And no, I don't know what you mean, but all right, sure, yeah. What a weird thing to say. So, there was another one that I really liked. The difference between you and me is I never got caught.
Yeah, that was that has to do with like the concept of the record on like the visual side of things. Like the main character, that's kind of like his like, I finally got you, and you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not gonna get, it's like that thinking, I guess, the motive that those people, like people who do bad things, think that they're getting off scot-free.
One of the big frustrations of life. So I found it interesting because I was reading through the lyrics of the songs, and all these cool song titles, but pretty much none of the lyrics like actually reference the title, which I guess it would be weird to have the chorus be, I never believed in magic till my dog turned into a snake. But pretty much none of the titles are said again in the lyrics. So how do you name your songs when you write them?
I think with this record, it was a lot of like, it just felt right. I think that there's a couple songs where it like fits. Like Bereft of Light is the one that where it actually does repeat the name, but that is a that song isn't necessarily related to the concept of the record. It's just a song about Elden Ring. And then the song Mithrandir, that's like a Lord of the Rings reference. So, you know, like there's stuff like that that kind of like repeats and stuff, but like for the most part, these songs, I don't know. I like it just kind of felt right, I guess. Maybe.
Mm. So the opening track, GGO, what does GGO stand for?
It means get gayed on. It's
Okay.
like so that song is kind of funny because that's like something we say to each other, like get owned or like you got gayed on, and like it's it was like a funny thing at first, but that song is about imposter syndrome. And the name of that came about because I was like, it's like this song is telling me I got gayed on. And I was like, kind of fits, let's do it.
As another expression I've never heard before. Is that like a Maryland thing?
I'm pretty sure one of the guys in Boundaries said it to me. And it was just like a lot of these are just like funny references between our friends. Like I've referenced Gage Lanzo on 2 of the records because that's like one of my best friends. So a lot of these are like references to like things that certain people would know about.
Boundaries, the hardcore band?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's a great segue to one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about because you referenced MySpace earlier. Like your sound is definitely that old school deathcore sound, not the modern, like I call it an arms race for who can make the gnarliest animal noise. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like some of the death metal and definitely all of the hardcore has been forgotten in modern deathcore. So it was kind of a nice, refreshing thing to hear, you know, traditional death metal riffs and hardcore delivery.
Yeah, it's kind of our thing. Like I like the modern deathcore stuff. It's
Yeah.
just not like something I would personally write, I think. I mean, specifically for Thus Spoke, like something we kind of talked about was like what do we want to do for the production? And we kind of were torn between doing like modern or like should we do something that sounds older? But ultimately I think the mix we got really reflects that this whole thing is a celebration of that time period, you know?
And what is it about that time period that, I mean, for me, I'm probably a bit older than you. For me, it's obviously nostalgia, but what is it about that time period that speaks to you?
Um, it is like a nostalgic thing. It reminds me of like when I was younger and my cousins would show me the bands that ended up influencing Thus Spoke. Like I'm only 27, so I wasn't like around for like the mid 2000s MySpace era, but I'm also in the middle. Like I like the MySpace is right here. I'm in the middle, and then like the TikTok kids are right here. So like seeing that, my cousins were who showed me like a mirror and Through the Eyes of the Dead and Elijah and the Casey Strain and like Suicide Silence and stuff like those bands. And it always reminds me of just being a kid because I always looked up to them, and they would always talk about going to these VFW shows and seeing these bands that are now wicked huge and whatnot. So it just reminds me when I was younger, I guess, very nostalgic feel and makes me feel really good, you know?
Yeah, I find it interesting that we talk about core music in terms of which social media
Yeah.
was big at the time. And I can also relate. You said your cousins were showing you this music. Like I'm a thrash and death metal guy, and it was like my older friends that were cluing me in on all that thrash and death stuff because I was too young I was a baby in the late '80s. So but those people that I looked up to were like, "Yo, check this out.
Yeah.
This is before Metallica was on MTV. Check this out." I was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that is cool."
That's dope. Yeah. It's like one of my favorite things I remember reminiscing with friends. And I was just talking about this the other day. I was in New York one time. I was like 19 with a bunch of my way older friends. And they were talking about seeing I Declare War at like a really tiny venue. And that's just something that brought that up for me.
So a lot of, and this is the main thing I wanted to ask you, a lot of extreme metal bands are heavily influenced by Nietzsche. And to me, some of that's pretty obvious. He questioned traditional morality, and the whole God is dead thing is, of course, metal as shit. But I also feel that most people come to this was a little bit more of a personal thing. So for me, I really liked in Twilight of the Idols what a petty asshole he was to other philosophers. Could you speak to why do you think he's so inspirational to metalheads, and then that's in general, but then on a more personal note, perhaps what you liked about the book?
I feel like Nietzsche is so counterculture. Like, I feel like he's like, I think my little brother, when he went to college, he took a philosophy class and they said to him, I think the best way to win an argument against Nietzsche is to kill him or something like that. And I was like, that's funny. But like, he's so, because like, I feel like traditional nihilism, in my opinion, is like everything sucks and nothing matters. And Nietzsche's take, in my opinion, on nihilism is like, everything might be empty of inherent quality, but this is how you can make it matter to you. And I feel like he's a very design your own life type of guy. And
Yeah.
like, I'm no like expert, but that's what I got out of the book. And that's what I think his whole, I mean, metal as a genre is so against the norm, you know, like um it's a lot more, I feel like it's a lot getting more ingrained into like pop culture with like more hardcore bands and stuff getting bigger, but there's still that taste of like, you know, like we are against the norm. It's kind of like, I guess I was just reading the Steve Jobs documentary, not to trend it off, but like he talks about that, and I think it's funny talking about them kind of correlating it in my head at least. But like the whole reason Apple was started was it was like a counterculture thing. And I feel like a lot of metal was started because of the same thing. It was to go against whatever was pop culture. And I feel like Nietzsche is a perfect embodiment of that. Like, oh, you think this is what nihilism is? Well, let me tell you this, you know?
It's kind of interesting that you mentioned Apple too. I never thought to compare the two, but Apple is a great example because it's like you say, it started as counterculture and now it's like, ingrained in culture. And certain genres of metal are kind of the same. It started as this really counterculture thing, and now there's a store in every shopping mall in America that sells, the aesthetic of metal.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it'll be right next to the Apple store.
I never even thought about that. That's so funny. Yeah. Steve Jobs is an interesting guy. I didn't know he like would hack his grades and like was all about that. It like blew my mind. I didn't know he was so spiritual and whatnot. It was very interesting character.
So I totally agree with your take on nihilism, and that's why Camus is actually one of my favorite philosophers, because he was, if you read The Plague, is very much like, yeah, none of this means anything, but I'm still gonna do my best work. And when it comes to Nietzsche, I think a lot of people misunderstand that whole God is dead thing. Like,
Yeah.
it sounds really cool, and it is really cool, but it's a warning as much as it is a statement. It's like, hey, in the absence, in a post-religious world, we need something else to aspire to, or we will, descend into nihilism. He was warning people about that and preaching, like you said, grab a hold of your own life. And I think that's what metal bands in general are doing, because it's like such an impossible task. And yet there you are grinding every day, trying to do it.
It's funny. A book that referenced Nietzsche that I read that blew my mind was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And like that was like the same take of like, I don't know if you've read it, but that's the story of a Holocaust survivor going through 4 different camps, I believe, and then being thankful for the experience.
Wow.
And like, I think that it's so important to go after what you want in life, because something like that could happen, or just in general, we never know what life is going to throw at us, right? So we have to take what we have that's ours and push ourselves to be, as Nietzsche called it, the Superman, to achieve your greatest version of who you are, because, tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Right. So let's get back to the record. I'm done with self-care. It's time for others' harm. That is a fantastic album title. How did that come to you?
So that was another like joke thing at first. uh, um, a lot of what happens with us book is we'll say funny things and then the meaning will start to come afterwards. Like there's so much more hindsight later on about what we initially plant, I guess, as ideas. But I was sitting in this room actually with our first drummer, and we were both smoking a lot of weed, and he pulled up a picture of like the impact font memes, but it was like the dad from Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. And it just said, I'm done with self care. It's time for others harm. And just like that song name, I Never Believed in Magic, we were just sitting there laughing. I was like, that'd be a crazy album name. And then we both looked at each other. I was like, it's the album name.
Yeah. Uh, there's something about that gallows humor. Like
Yeah.
metalheads are all about that gallows humor and that those dark sort of viewpoints on life are just in our nature. And then also what really spoke to me about this album title is we've all seen the deluge of like inspirational stuff on social media and talking about self-care and stuff. And all of that is great. Like, please practice self-care, take care of yourself, try to improve yourself. But there comes a point where it gets absurd, and it starts to become a parody of itself. And that's when I start to resent what started out as a really healthy thing.
I relate to that so much because I read a lot of, like, kind of since February, I've been reading a lot more, and I've read about 30 books since then, and
Impressive.
a lot of, thank you. I sometimes I have ADHD, so I hyper focus. I'm like, but the a lot of, I've been fortunate to read a lot of books that like they've talked about the same topic, but it hasn't seemed like regurgitated like bullcrap. But like there's definitely some, like sometimes I'll, like when I'm looking at new books to get, I'm like, that's literally, I just read that. Come on. Like, like sometimes it can almost seem, when it seems artificial and not genuine, I think that's what I'm trying to say, is when it can really build that resentment, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I've been going on rants against the manosphere a lot lately. There's just so many like there's the big guys, that are all super famous. And then there's all the Johnny come latelys that are basically copying and pasting exactly what those people say. And, some of those things, yeah, sure, there might be some value there in like embracing your masculinity and trying to become stronger and whatnot. But most of the time I can sort of sniff out like you just copy and pasted this and you tried to make it as hot of a take as possible so that it spreads more on social media. And it's so obviously fake and manufactured and not at all any sort of real personal philosophy.
A lot of people can look at a polished turd that was polished, handmade really well and go, wow, that's still a turd, but that's a nice polished turd. But we all know it's a turd, like
humans, man. We see something that works and we go, okay, I'm going to do that. But sometimes it's way too obvious.
Yeah, I feel like there has to be such a level of genuineness. Like if you're like, what's his name? He was the designer Virgil Abloh, I think his name was. He ran a company called Off White, and he like would give speeches. He was like the head of Louis Vuitton, like the creative department, and he was known as one of these most creative minds of all time. And he's like, just, if you ever get a chance to watch his speeches at college, they're insane. But he was the first one to go, and it blew my mind that somebody with that level of creativity would go, there's not one original thought that exists in this world. Everything that you think you're going to create has already been done. And it just like, but he also talks about pouring yourself into that. Like he taught, which is interesting. Like, and you can, I feel like everybody who's doing heavy music or music in general, there's only 12 notes on that scale. So you're going to write something that somebody might have written 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But if you're putting all of you into that and going, this is me, versus going, I'm just going to, as we were saying, like do something that is so artificial, then that's where it's like, yeah, it might sound like something that came out 20 years ago, but you can really see this is them inside of that. It's like
Yeah.
making the painting your painting is a way.
Yeah. So I also write for Metal Digest, and what you just said perfectly encapsulates what I wrote about this. Today, as we're recording this on the 18th, there's a new record from this band called Lick, death metal band out of Sweden. And death metal, it's at its essence is very simple. You know, it's chugging, scale run, blast beats, about gory
Yeah.
topics, right? It's a very simple formula, but I can hear it when somebody is doing that formula, and when somebody is like, those riffs are just, you can't listen to them without your lip curling. They're doing the thing, chug, scale run, you know, gory lyrics, but theirs just is, it's got that extra, it's got that punch, it's got that stank, and that's that spark, that thing that I'm looking for, versus somebody else that's just paint by numbers, chug, scale run,
Yeah.
gory lyrics.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like you can, like, there are certain bands that like I fall in love with like certain things because I know it's such a classic thing, but it's them still being them. Like a lot of the modern deathcore bands, you can really hear that, like, and like I'm not throwing no shade or anything like that, and I hope it doesn't sound like that, but like an example of where how you're saying the who can make the animal noise competition, it's pretty. If you look at the timeline, Lorna Shore came out with that
Right.
little EP, Into the Hellfire, and then all these other bands started doing it. But like, it's hard for me sometimes to look at other bands when I go, it just sounds a little artificial to me, you know,
Agreed. Yep.
because it's like, there are bands that I listen to that do that, like Cattle Decapitation. That is like the guy who made that, right? I'm pretty sure, I don't know if I'm misquoting something, but I think that's the guy who did that. But Will Ramos did the same exact thing as him, but you can kind of see the trajectory difference because it's Will Ramos putting Will Ramos into that, not
Right.
going, I want to do what the guy from Cattle Decapitation did because I'm trying to be that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did an episode about that, and I talked about Will Ramos starting that fire, and there was lots of comments. It's like, well, actually, it was done first here. It's like, yeah, but it didn't catch until Will Ramos did it. Like, for whatever reason, who knows what that reason is? The reason could be as simple as there was no TikTok back then.
That's
But
dope.
but for whatever reason, To the Hellfire is when that whole thing happened, because those commenters are correct. People were making animal noises, in the 70s, not before even metal. That's not the point. The point is this trend started in the late 2000s, early 2020s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's interesting to even look at bands that like are doing something like how we're talking about. It's like, you see the same structure pop up, but then they can put something about them into it. Like, was it, is it, I think like Internal Bleeding is like the first like slam band. I don't know if I'm misquoting or not, but then like Peeling Flesh is like a slam band who's pretty much doing that, but then it's like, like in like
Yeah.
such a tiny amount of time.
It's interesting to me that bands like Peeling Flesh are doing so well. And you mentioned hardcore earlier too. Like, if you would have told me 20 years ago that hardcore would be huge, like there would be a hardcore band at the biggest pop festival in the country, like I'd have been like, get out of
Oh
here.
yeah.
Hardcore is not that kind of music. But there's something about the present moment where hardcore is really resonating with the kids.
I feel like they'll be able to study this like 10 years from now to think about the like societal impacts. Cause like I think about what this really reminds me of is because I was just one day, for some reason, I was like, let's look at the history of metal in general. And like a band like Black Sabbath came out during that like boom of industry, of industrial stuff. And I'm pretty sure that's where the term metal came from because it was from that age. And there was also all this like social political stuff going on, not uncommon to what's going on in today's day and age. I feel like a lot of people need something to where if they feel like the whole world around them is chaos, at least they have a band like Peeling Flesh or Knocked Loose to go see. You know, like I feel like this is something that really helps unite people in a time where maybe social things are at a crisis, you know?
Right. Agreed. Yeah. It's it seems rather impossible to me to not be pissed off right now.
Yeah.
Like even if you're of the political persuasion where y'all just won the election, they even seem like pretty pissed off in victories. Like that's kind of weird. Like you won,
Yeah. There's so much of everybody just like pissed. Cause I feel like where I've looked back on like the pandemic and think about the beauty of all of this is like that was like a ticking time bomb of everybody being stuck in their house. And then like, you know, pandemic's over, we can go outside again. And now it's like there's such an explosion of what was locked away for
Yeah.
such a long time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I was really worried during that time because all the rock venues near me closed. But for some reason, and thank Christ, metal was able to keep going. I have a pretty dour outlook on the future of like just plain old, good old fashioned rock and roll.
Yeah.
But metal is still like we're finding a way because there's like you said, there's something about this present moment where people need this.
Yeah. It's like, I think what's also interesting is like there was a whole generation of kids that were like trapped, and now like from like the perspective of like my band, we're in a very niche small genre, but like it'll be a Tuesday night in Texas, which is where kind of this new age of like revival MySpace stuff is popping. It'll be a Tuesday night and 400 kids will come out.
Yeah.
And like that's crazy, and all of them are just like they're like 15 and just hyped to be a part of any experience. And I remember being young like that. And that's also another point of why I love this, because I'm like, all these kids are coming up to us going like, oh, this is our first show. This is our first show, our first show. And like, I remember being that first show kid and
Yeah.
like from being locked away in the pandemic to kind of going out and seeing the world. I think it's such a beautiful time to be at that age and to explore everything that life has to offer.
That's awesome. Yeah, because if you go to a gajillion concerts like I do, some of them will sort of get lost in the sauce a little bit. But that first show is such
Oh, yeah.
a formative experience, and so that means you were a part of that kid's life. You were a part of that formative experience.
There's like been some cool moments like where there's been like that first show or meeting a kid before they start a band, and then you play with them after they start that band. Like there's a band that's on the tour we're doing in the summer called Mauled, and their vocalist Abe I met at a show we played in Covington, Kentucky, and he was like, oh, I'm starting this band. And I told him, I was like, well, when you start it, like just let us know, like hit us up, we want to play with you. Because like I'm like, I remember being young, like let's give him a chance. And then my friend, the drummer of Orthodox, was like, you gotta check out this band Mauled. And I didn't even know that was him. And I was like, do you guys want to go on the tour with us? And he told me, he was like, it's crazy because I remember telling you about Mauled before we were banned. And then he reminded me of the show, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't even believe that. It blows my mind.
That's a great story. I love that story too because it could have so easily went a different direction. You see the kid again later. It's like it's terrible. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
what do I say now? But that you won't never know unless you give them that chance. That's the cool thing about it. So I love that serendipitous, and I hope it works out. Like I hope y'all get to tour again a lot. And I'm glad you actually brought that up because that's the question I always ask everybody when they've got a new record coming out. It's like, you're going to tour on this thing? You got to come to Atlanta?
Are you located out of Atlanta?
No, but it's my closest market. So that's where I drive to go and see concerts. I'm shooting Meshuggah tonight. I do concert photography too.
That's dope.
So I drive up there. I do my thing, get home way too fucking late, but
That's cool though.
Yeah. So do you have any stops anywhere near?
We don't have one that is going to Georgia. We have, I think close would probably be like South Carolina or I'm trying to think because for like Atlanta, it's kind of in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have anything that's particularly too close, but I'm pretty sure on the one we're doing in the fall that I cannot disclose yet, there is an Atlanta. I believe there's an Atlanta show. I have to double check.
Very cool. Well, I will keep my eyes peeled for that, and I'll put your social links in the description to this so that people that want to catch you in whatever city can take a look, see where y'all are going to be and where. And one more thing before I plug the album again and let you go. It says in your bio that you did a 3 guitar attack on this thing. And I can really hear that in the riffs. They are, it's not like a Judas Priest 3 guitar sort of sound with all these different, I mean, there are harmonies, but like you get what I mean. Yours is chuggier, and the density of doing those syncopated chugs with that many guitars, I can really hear it on the record.
Yeah, we try to make it loud and ugly. You know what I mean?
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And perfect. Thus spoke Zarathustra. I'm done with self-care. It's time for others' harm. May 23rd. Y'all get it. And then check out the tour. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for having me, man.